Rory, good to see you, man. Welcome to Popternative.
Thank you for having me.
I love this film, and like when I'm watching this film, three kind of elements kind of stand out. So in a lot of ways, I saw this movie as like a genre-bending movie because there's the thriller component, the crime component, and the drama. Because just so much happens with your character, every character's. When you're reading the script, is there one of those three elements that kind of stands out the most, or are they kind of all equal?
I guess they're sort of all equal, and I read it selfishly, just focusing on Mike, my character, and what I like and what I could do with him. Um, so yeah, I sort of go into it with a selfish mindset, I guess, and try not to be selfish once I arrive on set.
Absolutely. Like we don't want to go into big spoilers, but like there's just like every decision that this character seems to make, he feels like he's making it better for himself, but he's not. So it's like, what is that like kind of reading a character like that? And are you kind of frustrated as well as like a viewer, like reading this character as well?
Oh yeah, that was a big part of the appeal was this guy just makes the worst decisions at every turn. uh, and he's really trying to take control of his own life, and then he's just blowing it the whole time. And I'm just reading it, I'm just watching this guy blow it over and over again. Uh, and I thought that was interesting to try to come into a room with confidence and then just fail. And it's just a series of failures. And I thought that was cool, and that would be fun to do.
Whether you look at this film or your past projects, in a lot of ways, I find it interesting because it's like two journeys with the like before you film something and then when you film it, because a lot happens like before you go to camera and everything. Do you see it as kind of two separate storytelling acting journeys, or is it one kind of big journey with multiple steps?
Yeah, I kind of see it as one journey. Meeting with Phil Alok, the director in Brooklyn, and talking about the character, and then I try to just keep that in the back of my mind, and then getting on the set and putting on the wardrobe, the silly leather hat and leather trench coat. It just sort of all starts to add up, and you just sort of build this character together.
Yeah.
And I think the small details matter. And I would do these little things. You probably don't even notice it, but like his hands are all taped up. He's got band-aids all over his hands, and I was just trying to show that this guy is taped together. He's just barely hanging on, and also he makes bad decisions. So right when you see him, his hands are all messed up, and it's like, oh, he scraped his hand. He probably just made the wrong turn. And get ready, because you're going to see this guy make the wrong turn at every step of the way. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you just start to add these details, and you flesh out a solid character, hopefully.
I mean, yeah, I'm walking on eggshells with this interview when I'm talking about 5 pounds of pressure because, like, we don't want to spoil anything, you know what I mean? But it's kind of evident very
Mhm.
early on that, like, your character just drives everyone crazy. But, like,
Yeah.
um, how conscious are you of the audience, like when you're making something like 5 pounds of pressure, where they're going to be on the edge of their seat? There's the kind of like something happens in the beginning, right? It's who done it, who maybe is getting kind of murdered or anything. How like are you thinking like an audience member when you're filming it, or does that kind of happen after you wrap?
Yeah, I try not to,
Okay.
because obviously you have to in some ways. You gotta sort of play to the camera, find the light, and all that stuff. But yeah, I try to just invest in my character and take it very seriously, and hopefully that will translate. Uh, because it been doing this for years and auditioning, and if you go into an audition room and you try to give them what you think they want, you're gonna fall on your face. But if you go in there and you do what you want and you do what you think is most interesting, that's when you get called back. So yeah, I think you got to kind of just put the blinders on while you're doing it, and then once you expose it to the world, you just like, ugh, I hope this works.
That audition process you just mentioned, I feel like is such a misconception with like the actor life. Like I feel like people don't even realize that sometimes because there's the obvious misconceptions of like one, actors know what's going on all the time. That's a big misconception. But then there's another one too where it's really kind of like on to the next, right? Like you go in, you have a great you have a great storytelling journey with this character, and then you wrap, and then it really is on to the next. But there's like a lot of misconceptions I feel like with like acting specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly acting is mostly rejection. It's when you're trying to get the job, you typically don't, but
Mhm.
when you do, that rules. But then even if you do get the job, you go on set and you can do something that you think is really interesting, and then audiences don't respond to it the way you wanted, and there's another form of rejection, and it's just you kind of get callous to it, and yeah, you sort of you do what you can, and then you got to forget about it, and if it gets a great reaction, then you can sort of revel in it, but
Yeah.
don't expect anything.
How separate are your past kind of projects to a new project, like in terms of preparation, mindset, characters? Like, are they very separate? Like when you're done, or like are there things from other characters you've done that you could bring to like a new project? Like, I'm just curious about that a little bit.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess and that's why I think it's important to watch your own work as an actor, even if
Mm.
you hate it. You need to see what works and what doesn't. Maybe something you think is really effective doesn't land, doesn't translate to the screen. Uh, so yeah, I think it's important to watch your work and take what works and what doesn't to the next project. Obviously, you don't want to like do the same thing every time, but you want to build on your ability.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
And speaking of some of your past things, I mean, I'm a big horror movie fan, so I'm sure you know where I'm going with this one right now. But like, it's one of those things where, and it's not even a spoiler alert, but a lot of my viewers have watched the Scream franchise. But you are on one of these coveted lists, so to say, of Ghostface killers, which is crazy. Just simple question. I mean, what is that like? And just seeing the legacy and the popularity of that franchise year after year.
Yeah, it's great. It is an honor to be a Ghostface. And actually, Wes Craven's last film was Scream 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's an honor to be up there with Matthew Lillard and Timothy Olyphant and Laurie Metcalf.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm into that. I'm
But
proud of that one.
it's interesting because you joined that franchise at the most kind of interesting time, in my opinion, because you're at that situation where like you book it, you're part of a Scream franchise, and it's like you might know what to expect in a lot of ways because like the popularity of the films before that, but in a lot of ways like you don't know what to expect, right? Like how people react. So I feel like there was like a ping pong match with joining Scream 4. Do you know what I mean by that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. And I remember when I first got the project, when it was first presented to me, it was, hey, would you be interested in Scream 4? Don't let the 4 put you off, because the fourth installment of something usually isn't great.
Yeah.
But with Scream, it's different. It was also a lot of time had passed since the third one, uh, and it's gets to the whole meta of it all, and social media was kind of taking off, but it wasn't definitely wasn't where it is now.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, it was an interesting time,
Yeah.
and I really like the new ones too.
Oh, absolutely. My favorite thing about horror movies is I feel like where you're like strapped in a roller coaster while you're in the theater and everything. Like I feel like that's like my favorite thing about them. Like, are you a fan of horror movies as like a viewer?
Yeah, yeah, I love the tension. I love the and also it's like great actors in a horror movie is the stakes are so high,
Yeah.
uh, typically. So I feel like a lot of actors when they're in a horror movie don't get enough credit,
Yeah.
because they're really, if they're good at what they do, they're putting themselves in some really terrible places.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I think it's sort of brushed aside sometimes, but I like that, like with Ari Aster and people like that, they're sort of horror seems to be getting a seat at the adult table now, and it's
Mhm.
really cool to see.
And it's interesting going back to 5 pounds of pressure. I mean, that's not a horror movie, but it's got like thriller kind of components that might freak you out depending on the audience member. And I find it really crazy. And I'm wondering if you kind of noticed this when you were in Scream, like when you were seeing all the fans of Scream, because like horror movie fans, we eat it all up. We eat the thrillers up, the supernatural, you know what I mean? Even if they're not actual horror movies. So it's like, is it cool to think about the fact that like if you make something that has kind of thriller horror movie, maybe elements in or sprinkles that like you have a whole community that's gonna back it. Like that's one of the things I've noticed the most about the horror movie community. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're very loyal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be part of. Yeah, I'd like to continue doing some things like that, and maybe playing the straight man in it and not the crazy killer. Might be nice too. Maybe playing the victim. I mean, I guess I am a victim in a lot of things, but I'm usually pretty unhinged.
It's interesting. But it's also like there's some films that you've done when you were younger that, you know, are timeless films that people will go back and watch, right? Like, you know, Signs and everything. And Mean Creek was one I loved growing up. That was one of my favorites. But
Oh, cool.
but it's like, you know, that happened a long time ago, but because of social media and everything, people still go back and watch them and Letterboxd and everything. You know what I mean? Is it like, yeah, you want to be in the present, but it is really cool that a lot of those kind of have no shelf life in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I like, try to do things that are kind of timeless. Hopefully, I think Mean Creek, like you mentioned, is one of those. But that's also what drew me to 5 Pounds of Pressure. Was it seemed like a movie that could have come out in the '90s, which I really liked. It wasn't. It's not bound to today. It's not. We're not covering things like social media and technology and all that. It's kind of a timeless story. It could have been kind of a movie that seems like it could have been the 1890s too. They're kind of cowboys. I mean, they got the stupid hat, but it's kind of timeless. And I'm drawn to things like that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure.
And I love 5 Pounds of Pressure, and I can't wait for people to check it out. Rory, it was so great chatting with you, man. Thank you so much for your time. Seriously.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot, man. I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.